Hello, I am the Unfeeling. This was originally going to be a 10-part series, but half of the websites listed on the Take Part article are pretty much dead. The next active blog I found ended up being the last one listed. So this 10-part series has now been turned into a 5-part series, ending with Bitch Magazine's blog.
Bitch Media is a non-profit feminist media organization best known for publishing the magazine Bitch, Feminist Response to Pop Culture. Bitch Media's mission is to provide and encourage an engaged, thoughtful feminist response to mainstream media and popular culture. We seek to be a fresh, revitalizing voice in contemporary feminism, one that welcomes complex arguments and refuses to ignore the contradictory and often uncomfortable realities of life in an unequivocally gendered world.
Now would probably be a good time to mention this. I usually have an issue with ideology as a whole. There are plenty that have noble roots and certainly have their place in the world. However, I find that when someone has already made up their mind about what the world is like and what they think the world should be like, they tend to look for things to prove they're right. They'll end up finding things that aren't really there in the most mundane things. Once you've become consumed by an ideology, oftentimes all you'll ever find is what you perceive to be your enemy. And the reason why I'm not placing the blame squarely on feminism is because we all pretty much do it. Feminists, MRAs, atheists, Christians, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, and so on. We all do it to an extent. I think it really becomes an issue when everything has to fit within your paradigm in order for you to be okay with its existence. I'm not accusing Bitch Magazine of doing anything wrong. The quote, Bitch Media's mission is to provide and encourage an engaged, thoughtful feminist response to mainstream media and popular culture, just reminded me of people that look for anything and everything to complain about to prove they're right, which usually ends up making them seem stupid or batshit crazy.
For as long as we've been publishing Bitch, there's one question that gets asked over and over and over. Why did you choose that word as the name of your magazine? Well, we're aware that the magazine's title, and the organization's name, is off-putting to some people. We think it's worth it, and here's why. The writer Rebecca West said, "People call me a feminist whenever I express sentiments that differentiate me from a doormat." We'd argue that the word bitch is usually deployed for the same purpose. When it's being used as an insult, bitch is an epithet hurled at women who speak their minds, who have opinions and don't shy away from expressing them, and who don't sit by and smile uncomfortably if they're bothered or offended. If being an outspoken woman means being a bitch, we'll take that as a compliment. We know that not everyone's down with the term. Believe us, we've heard all about it. But we stand firm in our belief that if we choose to reappropriate the word, it loses its power to hurt us. And if we can get people thinking about what they're saying when they use the word, that's even better. Bitch, it's a noun, it's a verb, it's a magazine, it's a feminist media organization.
I also have to note the video that's found in this section too. In it, co-founder Andy Zeisler claims that they called their magazine Bitch because back in 1996, bitch wasn't used the same way as it is today. Nearly 20 years later, she claims that bitch was a term specifically toward women that spoke their minds and stood up for themselves. I don't know the validity of that, but that seems a bit far-fetched. Am I saying it didn't happen? Absolutely not. I'm sure she's at least partially right. I'm positive it did in fact happen. However, I'm sure the term wasn't hurled at women that were just outspoken and independent. Sometimes, women do act like bitches in the same way that sometimes men act like assholes. Some really are bitches and assholes. Then of course, there are the people that referred to women as bitches and hoes, regardless of what kind of person they were. I'm not going to pretend like we don't have some sexist aspects of our culture, such as plenty of rap songs for instance, but I don't like how she tries to say it was just because a woman was outspoken and stood up for herself. Then Miss Zeisler goes on to say something that I never thought was a good idea. She said they named their magazine and organization bitch in order to reclaim that word and take away its power. That's very similar to how blacks tried to do the same with the word nigger. To me, that's incredibly dumb. It doesn't come off like someone trying to empower themselves. It actually comes off as someone embracing ignorance. No self-respecting black person would ever refer to themselves as a nigger or nigga. Likewise, why would a woman, who wants respect, take the title of bitch? No one likes bitches. They're usually loud, confrontational, histrionic, cause a bunch of problems, and can't get along with anyone because of it. Just because you're trying to redefine a word from its everyday use, doesn't mean people are going to recognize it as legitimate. If I meet a black person that refers to themselves as a nigga, I don't have any interaction with that person anymore. I do the same for any woman that self-identifies as a bitch. There's also something in the frequently asked questions I want to address.
Why does bitch call itself a feminist response to pop culture? Bitch looks at the media and its products through a lens that takes into account the historical and cultural representation of gender in pop culture. Movies, television, news magazines, fashion magazines, blogs, comics, advertising, music, computer games, all are media that have traditionally reflected a narrow vision of what women and girls are and can be, whether it's the dumb blonde, the needy wife, the castrating mother, the I'm not a feminist but woman, or the heartless, man-shunning domestic media mogul, to name but a few. We seek to look at all pop culture through an analytical yet witty, sharp yet sympathetic lens, as well as to celebrate the feminist culture makers who are transforming the media with their unique contributions. Bitch aims to put a lucid, balanced face on feminism for all kinds of folks, including people who aren't really aware that feminism refers to more than women who don't want to shave their legs, or simply getting more women into positions of power. Similarly, we encourage people to consider feminism as a necessary part of the broader social justice movement.
This goes back to what I was saying about ideology. Once you've come to your own conclusion, before really starting your examinations, or perhaps, have noticed trends within a certain group while ignore trends of another group, you get blinded by your own bias. This is a good example of it. They mention stereotypes of women in media, but what about the stereotypes of men? Why is it such a bad thing that women get portrayed as a dumb blonde, a needy wife, castrated mother, have the gall to say she's not a feminist, or a heartless man-hater, but it's perfectly fine to have the dumb macho man that thinks he's hot shit just because he's physically strong, but doesn't have a brain, the socially awkward nerd that can't even talk to women, stand up for himself to a bully or an abusive boss, who is often a man as well, the womanizer, the pedophile, the power-hungry villain, the warmongerer, and so on. There's two sides to every story. Personally, I don't really have a problem with these things outside of cliched storytelling. That's all they are, stories. I can't think of a single movie, TV show, comic book, etc. that has made me who I am. My personality and habits didn't develop because the media told me to be this way. They developed based upon my natural tendencies and my real-life environment. Whenever people argue about media's influence on people, I always have to ask, if media is such a dominating factor in people's behavior, and we grew up at the same time, why are you nothing like what the women in media and entertainment were? If media truly determined what people were like, wouldn't you be just like them? Media and entertainment usually have such a small effect on you when you have real-world experiences on a daily basis, outside of, say, opinions about political topics. It's pretty hard to convince you that women should be nothing more than submissive housewives and let the men do all the work because they're just weak and stupid, when you know plenty of women that are nothing like that, wouldn't go for that kind of thing, and have desires of their own. I rarely see people advocating for a traditionalist family structure and culture, no matter which side of the political spectrum they fall, outside of older politicians that grew up in a different culture than what we have now, so I don't see how we're constantly told that women are being kept down, when the vast majority of people are all for women's freedom to choose how she lives her life. Anyway, the first article I saw was about an indie rock musician and singer, Angel Olsen. It was basically just a positive review of her work, nothing really feminist to see there. The next was a feminist news roundup, which was just linking to different articles on other sites. I'd much rather find an original article on this site. Let's continue. Next up was Bitch Tapes, which is basically a collection of recommended music. I'm writing this as I go along, and wow. This site is really starting to sound more like a music site with some news sprinkled in it. Okay, finally, an article about an issue I can talk about. This article focuses on several signs about abortion that have been posted in several spaces.
In early August, a team of 6 people fanned out across the New York City subway system, putting up sticky notices that look like they could be official city notices. But if subway riders stopped and read the small posters, they would see that they actually bore the image of a pair of hands and a message about abortion. "Abortion is nothing to be ashamed of," reads one design. "Mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives have had abortions," reads abortion. The artists and Guerrilla sticker team is part of Project Voice, a campaign to reduce stigma around abortion that received a grant this year from nonprofit The Abortion Conversation Project. Even though we were tagging the trains, it was important to me that the sticky notes felt less like tagging and more like a conscientious art installation. "I wanted the placement of the notes to feel precise and inviting," says organizer Maya Pindak. "Artists around the world hijack public signage to spread a message. Altering public infrastructure is a direct and simple way to surprise people by disrupting a familiar environment with a new idea. Changing public signs can be a powerful way to subvert an official government message."
Well, first allow me to say, I have no problem with spreading this message. While I recognize that I am one of the minority of people that believes women should have the freedom to have an abortion, regardless of circumstance, I also don't think it should be something to be ashamed of. In my opinion, abortion should definitely be used as a last resort if previous birth control measures have failed. I have friends that have had abortions and they feel horrible afterwards because they knew the embryo would have grown to be a child someday. While I don't think there should be shame in it, I fully recognize that there is a level of moral sacrifice for many women. They either have to compromise their morals or be stuck with a child they didn't want and likely can't afford to take care of. It's truly a dilemma, and I hope more women are aware of the consequences of their actions so that they'll take as many preventative measures before abortion even becomes an option. With all of that said, I don't like how this message is being spread. Here we have a group posting sticky notes on public property to promote a message, but instead of doing it on places like bulletin boards and other areas where that kind of thing is allowed and expected, they intentionally post in them in places that people don't expect to see them. While it is an effective way to get your message out there, you are also making your message a little unwelcome. It's similar to the preachers that go to subways and train stations to preach about the gospel. I have had many encounters with them and they can be quite annoying. Imagine these sticky notes were posted in the same places, but instead of saying abortion shouldn't be something to be ashamed of, they said, "Have you turned your life over to God?" Such a thing would be considered inconsiderate to those in the area. I consider this to be just as inconsiderate, even though I agree with its message. My other issue is comparing these sticky notes to subverting an official government message. Another way to say that is subverting government propaganda. As far as I can tell, our government doesn't really have an official message about abortion. If anything, it's politicians that have a lot to say about it, both for and against it. Just because they are a part of the government doesn't mean that are acting on behalf of it. The personal beliefs of the individuals don't always reflect the beliefs of the collective. Besides, like I said in What is Feminism Part 3, only 28% of Americans believe abortion should be legal, regardless of circumstance, while the majority of people believe it should only be legal under certain circumstances. I understand wanting to persuade people to be on your side, but don't use misleading information and tones in order to win people over. After skipping all the other music, news roundups, and podcast links, I found another article to discuss.
Big huge trigger warning, obviously. This past Monday, a woman named Christy Mack took to Twitter to post an almost unbearably disturbing series of photos and an account of a savage beating at the hands of her ex-boyfriend, a mixed martial artist who calls himself War Machine. In the photos, Mack lies in a hospital bed, her face and legs covered in mottled bruises, her eyes swollen shut, and behind ballooning lips her teeth are broken. Her description of the attack features an enraged War Machine, real name, Jonathan Copenhaver, arriving at her house in Las Vegas to find Mack with a male friend. After wordlessly beating the other man, Copenhaver, recalls Mack, made me undress and shower in front of him, then dragged me out and beat my face, and also sawed much of my hair off with a dull knife. She escaped when Copenhaver left the room briefly, running naked from her house and knocking on doors in her neighborhood. It's a story that, to any sentient person, should be sickening, horrifying, and completely indefensible. Because Mack is a former porn star, though, Plenty of people in the media and beyond have taken the incident as an opportunity to shame and blame. That was one facial Christy Mack didn't see coming, joked one wannabe Daniel Tosh on Twitter. Someone calling herself God's holy warrior took it upon herself to post some exciting pictures of lakes of fire alongside the tweet, "Please reconsider your career and lifestyle if you don't want to go to hell," and others replied to her Twitter dispatches with messages so cruel that typing them out makes my fingers want to hurl.
I want to stop here for a second so I could address something. By Christy Mack's account, there was a man that War Machine beat as well. Why aren't we hearing about him? Why isn't his name even mentioned? He would be a witness and be able to give his account of what happened as well, but I don't hear anything about him. In fact, if it wasn't for this article, as it is the first article I've read about the incident, I wouldn't have known another man was involved at all.
The fact that War Machine is an MMA fighter doubles the blame heaped on Mack, and plenty of people commenting on the story seem to be doing so mainly to shrug. Well, what did she expect? Dispensing wisdom like you date a knucklehead, you end up getting the knuckles. These sages effectively put the onus of the attack on Mack herself, especially given her revelation that this wasn't the first time she'd been beaten by Copenhaver. You decided to push his buttons till you ruined him, accused one follower. A lesson learned. Christy shrugged another. Why didn't you leave? Pressed another. Women. The media response, predictably, has been no less pearl-clutching. Friends say they warned porn star Christy Mack to stay away from violent texts, touted Fox News. MMA ex-made rape joke months before alleged attack, reported Hollywood Life. And a few headlines don't even name Mack, though she's arguably the more famous of the two. The ever-classy Daily Mail's reads John Copenhaver wanted after beating of porn star girlfriend.
Here's something people need to realize, nothing of what was just mentioned really matters. No matter what happens, people will have negative opinions, but the reason why it doesn't matter is because it's not going to change the court case against War Machine. Her profession as a porn star, lifestyle, opinions of friends, War Machine's past behavior, etc. won't be used in court as a way of excusing War Machine's alleged attack. If anything, they will be used against him. They will demonstrate a pattern that points to him as the attacker, and at that point, no court system will say, "Sorry bitch, you should have known this shit was going to happen." Our apologies, sir, you're free to go. And to think we almost put a man in jail for beating a woman. Who has ever heard such a thing? It will never happen. He will be tried. Odds are he would be found guilty. And because he's an MMA fighter and at that point, a convicted woman beater, those inmates are going to have lots of fun beating the ever-living shit out of him when they get the chance. So again, unless it's in court being proposed by the defense in order to get War Machine off, it doesn't matter what other people say. They don't decide what's going to happen within the court system. The other thing I want to point out is the author of this article, who just so happens to be Andy Zielser, misrepresents Hollywood Life and a little of Fox News as well. Let's see what Fox News reported.
And while War Machine has been universally condemned for the alleged assault, some are saying Mack should have known he was capable of such behavior. President of Exquisite Entertainment, Howard Levine, who has worked with Mack, told Fox 411, "She was warned several times. They broke up a while ago and he moved out of state. He is delusional," Levine added. "He came back thinking he was going to propose to her and they would get married." Sources claiming to be close to Mack have also told the gossip site The Dirty that they told her War Machine was bad news, and to stay away. But those same sources say Mack wasn't listening. The site obtained pictures of the former couple together post their supposed breakup in bed only a week or so ago, and they two were spotted together recently as a week ago, said site owner Nick Ritchie. War Machine reportedly caught her cheating. He thought they were still together. What he did was 100% wrong, but she provoked him. Lex Jurgen from the gossip site WWTDD says Mack made a bad choice. Stephen A. Smith got suspended from ESPN for saying women shouldn't provoke their violent boyfriends. What about dating a guy who's been arrested and imprisoned several times for violent assault? He said. Levine says either way, War Machine needs to be punished. He is an abuser and needs to go to jail for a long time, Levine said. The Ultimate Fighter has a history of violence. He was arrested on assault charges in 2010 and served jail time in 2011 and 2012, according to ESPN.
The first thing to notice is that his reports that War Machine has been universally condemned. No one is saying what he did was right. No one is defending him. Everyone is saying, if he did it, he needs to be in prison for it. I have yet to see a single person approving of War Machine's alleged attack. No one supports it. It bears repeating because every time I hear about victim blaming, they try to paint it as a way of accusing others of saying, that bitch deserved what she got. No, she didn't. And nobody is saying she did. What they're doing is showing that there are ways to avoid a situation like this. War Machine has been convicted of violence in the past. That should have been a big reason to avoid him altogether. What they're doing isn't blaming Christy Mack for being attacked. What they're doing is demonstrating to other people what to avoid when getting involved with someone. That's the point of bringing all of this up. A reason I'm not a fan of the victim blaming narrative is because we've all been in a situation where a friend is doing something they shouldn't be doing. You warn them over and over, but they don't listen. Sometimes, they'll even ask you for advice, but completely ignore it and do exactly what you advise them not to do. And when some incident occurs, where they're injured or heartbroken, what do we tend to do? It sure as hell isn't get in their face, yell at them, blame them, tell them we knew it was going to happen, and leave it at that. No. While we will bring up they should have listened to us, because the situation would have been avoided if they did, we fully recognize that their poor choices don't make it their fault. We recognize there are many factors into what leads to incidents. Why is it such a huge problem to say that the victim's actions contributed to it and it came back to bite them in the ass? If someone was robbed when they had their car door wide open, we have no problems saying you shouldn't have left the car door open. Why can't we say to battered women, what happened to you is horrible, but you shouldn't have been involved with the violent ex-con? I fully admit, leaving a car door open isn't the same as dating a violent ex-con. I'm merely bringing up the fact that there are preventative measures one can take to minimize the risks of being a victim of crimes. Sure, it's not foolproof, and you may still be a victim of a crime, but at least you know you did everything you could have done to avoid it, versus being consumed by guilt because you know if you could go back in time, you would have done things differently. Be on the safe side the first time around to help minimize your chances of being a victim. Now moving on to the Hollywood Life article. Miss Zeisler lumps Hollywood Life with Fox News as negative press of the incident, when it's very apparent they are in the same corner from the first two paragraphs.
Prior to his alleged attack on ex-girlfriend Christy Mack on August 8, War Machine did not exactly have a sterling reputation. In November 2013, he made a completely insensitive rape joke on Twitter. Read on to find out what he said. Adult film actress Christy Mack, 23, and MMA fighter War Machine, 32, went public with their romance in June 2013. Not long after, War Machine, born John Copenhaver, made an incredibly insensitive rape joke on Twitter. Not only was it not funny, it did not seem as if he was joking at all. In fact, it revealed his deep-seated misogyny, which may have been a factor in the vicious beating on August 8 which Christy alleges was at War Machine's hands. Read on to find out what he said, and Christy's response to the incident at the time.
It's completely obvious that Hollywood Life is trying to show how inappropriate behavior is nothing new to War Machine. They call him a misogynist, which is defined as dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against women, and even speculate that it may have been the reason he beat his ex-girlfriend, if he did do it. What I am saying is that somehow, this was lumped with Fox News and their so-called victim blaming, and Daily Mail not putting Christy Mack's name in the headline. Though why Miss Zeisler cares about that, and even brings up that Christy Mack may be more famous than War Machine is a complete mystery to me. Even when someone agrees that what War Machine allegedly did was wrong, it's not good enough. He must be condemned, practically lynched, and his alleged victim must be absolved of any and all blame, because we all know she didn't contribute to the incident at all, as she dated and eventually broke up with a professional fighter with a history of violence. Nope, she had nothing to do with the situation and we should just ignore anything that she could have done to avoid it. After all, it was unavoidable, right? I think I'll stop there. This seems to be yet another feminist site that focus on unimportant things. In this case, what unimportant people think of what's going on. They have no say in the court case. War Machine will likely be convicted. If he is, it will be because it was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is the attacker. And if that's the case, then he'll get what he deserves. I don't see why these feminists think that some people making jokes about it, thinking she should have avoided him from the very beginning, or other things that could have stopped this incident from happening, is somehow saying it's her fault. It's not. What happened to her is horrible, and if War Machine is the attacker, literally no one I have seen on any side is justifying his actions. No one. Everyone says if he did it, he needs to be in prison. Anyway, now that this series is over, if I wasn't a feminist before, I sure as hell aren't one now. Too many of them are dishonest and misrepresents people in effort to make their points. It could be their bias blinding them, and if it is, their bias always seems to blind them. Only 1 out of the 5 sites I looked at were okay, and even then, I had an issue with an article I mentioned at the end of What is Feminism Part 3. Overall, it just seems like feminists complain about the pettiest of things as well as feeling entitled to have things given to them at the forced expense of others, just because they're women. It makes them seem petty as they complain about mundane things that only they actually see as a problem, as well as entitled, and just mind-numbingly batshit crazy. Shit. That reminds me, I have to make that video about Joe's